So welcome to the course. Here you're going to learn how to build an interactive wireframe with Adobe XD. And so for this demonstration, you should have a clear sense by the time we're done of the difference between a wireframe and a prototype and how it's used to communicate ideas to like a client if you're your boss or someone who is going to be using the resource that you provide. And so what I'll show you in this video is how to use the shape, grid, and alignment tools to build a layout and to test your user experience challenges using Adobe XD. Once we're in the document, I'll show you how to make and move artboards. So what we're going to do is you'll be able to hit Control or Command plus, depending on whether or not it's a Mac or PC, so that you can zoom in to the artboard that you have. We will go on ahead and put double click the title above the artboard, and so that'll allow you to change the name, and then I'll show you how we can add additional artboards so that we can go ahead and set up our document for the exercise. So what we're going to do is simulate a pop-up. So I'm just going to go ahead and put in a home page, and then we'll want to add artboards for both the pop-up. So I'm hitting Control or Command negative to zoom out, and then the space bar to be able to drag the page so that you can add more artboards here. And then what we'll do is we'll add one for both the pop-up and for the about page, so that the demonstration that we do, we want to simulate what it would look like to click a button and then have a pop-up. And so have a pop-up and then be able to go to the next page when you close it out. So on your left-hand side, as you can see, there is a selector for the artboard underneath the T. So you'll select that and then just place that where you want it. Then you'll double tap and change the title, which will be right above the artboard. So we put pop-up here, and then on the left side, and then on the right, we just typed in about page. Then you can use your space bar to either move the page around or hit Control negative to be able to view. We just grabbed this one here and moved it. I just wanted you to be able to see that you can move the artboard. And so now we're going to hit Control or Command plus to zoom back in so that we can start to work on our design. But first we're going to go in and we'll go to File and Save. And then that'll allow us to save the document in case we need to come back to it later. So once we click on Save, we'll be able to go into the appropriate, we'll be able to put in a title, and then I'm just going to save it on my computer, but you do have the option of saving it in the cloud. And then you, hold on, let me just get to the correct folder. So I set up a demo folder here on my desktop, and so that's where we'll keep all of our files. So now that we're in here, we'll just go and choose that. So when we save our document, that will be where we find it. So with that being said, what we're going to do is we're now ready to work. And so if you look at the left-hand panel, you've got an arrow. And so we're just going to grab this rectangle shape tool and just drag that out. And so don't worry about the size just yet, because over here on the right-hand side, what we have are a way for you to set the width. So I'm just going to go ahead and put that in as 1600 by 200, and it's just arbitrary. I just wanted to get solid numbers so that you could see what that would look like. And then I'm just going to click on it and drag it to the center so that you can see how the shapes will snap to a grid. You can either use hotkeys or right click to copy and paste. It works very similar on a PC and a Mac, so Command C and Command V. But if you want to drag, you can actually see the guides will show you whether or not it's in alignment. And for the purpose of this exercise, I'm going to pull it slightly askew so that you can see some of the other tools. But I'll just grab that handle in the middle and drag it out so that you can see how the width can be stretched if you don't want to manually put those in. And then I just went ahead and hit Control C to copy the image above, or the rectangle above, and then Control V to paste it, but it ended up in the same spot. So I just went on ahead and dragged it down underneath the second rectangle. So you can see they're not really lined up. So what I'm going to do is hit Shift and then select all three. And then over here in the right hand corner are the align tools. So you have the option of, we're going to line up the right edge. I mean, it's very similar to some of the other Adobe programs. And so once we click on that, it should line all of those up. But if you notice the spacing between the top rectangle and the bottom rectangle, they're not evenly spaced. So everything's still highlighted. So we'll just click, this is the distribute vertically tool, in order to be able to go ahead and line those up and create an even amount of space between them. So then what we'll do is we'll actually just go ahead, since we want to keep everything together, I like to group them together. So you can either hit Command or Control G, and what I'll do is just test it by dragging the object and making sure that it's lined up with the center of the page. And if it, then we'll go ahead and use the text tool. So you can either hit the letter T, or you off to the left hand in the sidebar, you'll see the letter T below the pen tool. And so you'll notice that the text may not be big enough, so you can actually drag that and make it a little larger if you need to. So I just typed in header here so that you know that that's like part of the website. And it's typical, you're going to find that in most websites. And then I'm going to go off to the right hand tools and find a font. So I tried Impact, but that's not very legible. So I'm going to use this scroll bar and try to find one that's a little more accessible. So we went with Arial here, and then just below you can change the font size. If you wanted to adjust the kerning or the spaces in between the text, you're able to do that. And let's see. Then you also have some options to, as you can see, so this is adjusting. We're gonna probably change this from like a 12 or maybe make it a little bit bigger so you can see how that works. It increases more spacing. Centering works a little better if you have multiple lines of text, and we'll demonstrate that in just a moment. But for now, what we'll do is, let's see. So we're gonna we click the arrow tool, and then we click the header to make sure it's centered. And then I went on ahead and hit Control and then, or Shift and Alt. And so you should see like 2 arrows, and then I just dragged the header down. And then what that allowed me to do is to, once I right click, you can see kind of what the options are. So I'm just going to click Send to the back just so that you can see that that option exists. Because sometimes you may create stuff that doesn't show up, and so the issue may be that it's behind an object that you already have placed. So this will allow you to adjust that if you have multiple layers. And so there is a layers panel in the bottom left hand corner, but I just wanted to edit to undo that just so that you could have an example. So I went over to the T again in the left side navigation, and changed the text. I just hit Control A and then typed in body, which can be a little bit easier. Sometimes it doesn't highlight in the ways that you want to. And so I've just found that to be an easy workaround. And so this one I just directly hit the T for the footer. And so you'll just see I typed in the word footer and then hit escape, and that should bring me back to the arrow tool, so then I can just drag that over to the body to like line that up. And I just wanted to show you, if you wanted to change like whether or not the font is bold or italic, you can do that just under the font drop down. And then for the footer, you also have options like character options like all caps, or if you wanted to adjust the transparency or the fill color. you're able to do that as well. And so I just double tapped on the box for next to fill, and then dragged the little circle to the corner to change the color to red. For the header, I'm just going to uncheck this box so that you can see that it creates a border around the text. And then I can show you what it looks like to just playing with the color with the border. It works more or less the same way. So we'll uncheck the fill box, and then I'll just drag it a little bit bigger so that you can actually see what the effect of that looks like. And so that gives you some options, for some aesthetic choices. But just remember that when you're doing a wireframe, like, it's just a basic diagram to give someone just a high level overview of what's represented. You're not really filling in a lot of detail. I just wanted you to know that those tools were available. So I'm clicking here in the body text. I'm just going to go ahead and delete that because I want to show you just from a UX UI perspective how to go ahead and put in an image, and then if you need to change something, the edit drop down will in the menu above will give you options. So I went on ahead and made a rectangle just to create kind of a workspace. So there's some symbols that are kind of ubiquitous when you're building out a wireframe, and so we'll just do simulate what would look like the image tool. So I'll just drag this box over and kind of center it a little bit. And then I'm going to go over here and select the triangle tool. And so what we're going to do is I'm going to hit shift and then just drag this out to keep the aspect ratio intact. And then I'll also hit shift and alt again to create those double arrows, and then just drag that over, and then I'll hit Command and Alt to resize it without messing up the aspect ratio. So one copies and then the other resizes. And I always get them mixed up, but it's okay that as long as you know that those options exist, you can tinker with it and just get some practice. And so I just went on ahead and right clicked so that you can see if I wanted to send that larger triangle behind the smaller triangle and then adjust it, or if I wanted to combine them. I do have the option, let's see, and on the, hold on one second. So up here next to the button that says repeat grid, underneath where we align those tools, if I wanted to select that after I've hit shift to select both triangles, I could combine those very similar to the way that you can combine shapes like in Photoshop or Illustrator. But I'm just going to undo that. I just wanted you to see that that is an option if you need to create a shape that doesn't exist. So I'm just going to right click and group these because I think that that's a little more feasible for what it is that we need for this tutorial. And then if you may have also seen this with a circle, so I'll just grab a circle just so that you can see what that looks like. And let's see. So then I'll hit shift and hold that down to drag the circle, which is in the left toolbar, and it's not really showing up yet, so I'll probably have to adjust the border. So I'm going to just change that to a 3, so it's the line weight is a little more visible for the demonstration, and then I'll just select that with the other grouped items and then group that together so it's all one image. And that probably looks kind of consistent with what you're used to seeing. If you are on a website and there's an image that tells you that you can upload an image on a web editor. So those are just representations of what should be there. So you're able to use those images to demonstrate that this is where a picture would go on a website. So let's see. So this is an example of what happens like if you were to drag a rectangle over your image. I just sent that backwards, and then I can combine the group that I had before with the rectangle that I just added, and I may adjust the, let's see, I think we're okay. So we'll just group those together. And then one thing that might be really helpful for you to kind of check out down here in this lower corner above the layers panel is a tool where you can keep your assets. So if you see where it says components underneath colors and character styles, if you click on that little plus sign, you can actually just double tap and change it to an image. And so then anytime that you actually need to use an image somewhere rather than having to like build out all the triangles and circles and groups, what that'll do, I'm just going to grab the image label here underneath components and then drag, hold on, I'll use my space bar to drag this down a little bit so that you can see lower on the page. And then let me go back in here. And so what we'll do is we'll take the image and just drag that onto the second artboard. And what you can see is that you don't actually have to recreate the work. So I just went on ahead and deleted that using Control X, but I wanted you to kind of see the options. If you needed to right click, you're able to do that. So I'm just using the space bar to move the page around again. And I also am going to click on this so you can see what happens when you try to resize it. So one little tricky thing about XD is that once you group images together, it's not as intuitive as you would think it would be in terms of scaling with aspect ratio. So just make sure that when you click on an image to resize it, that you're doing it. See that in the left green, the left hand corner, there was a green little symbol there. So if you drag that handle, you'll be able to resize it without it messing up. But if you were to use a handle somewhere else, it may throw some of the sizing off. So or the orientation. So it's just good to know that that exists in case you need to make any adjustments on your grouped items or the items that you've combined. So with that being said, I'm just going to move this over here, and I'm actually going to move it a little bit lower because I forgot to add a navigation bar, so I'll just grab this rectangle tool and just drag that across to the end. And so I don't know if you've seen on a website where there's just like a menu that lets you either like there's a drop down. We'll just label it as a navigation menu so that you have that language in case you're looking for different examples of what that looks like. But sometimes you can hover over them and they'll drop down. Sometimes you can just click on it and it acts more like a button or a link that will take you to like the about page or the contact page. So I added the navigation menu just with the text tool. And for some reason I'm having some challenges like getting that. Okay. Here's what we're gonna do. It looks like it replicated the last thing that we did. So if I need to actually go back and resize it, I'm just dragging it right now to see if it'll fit. And so I'm over here on the right hand side. I'm just gonna click that checkbox to fill it in and get rid of the border because that's not really what we need right now. And then I hit escape so that I can just grab the navigation menu and drag it over to try to get it centered onto the page. And then I just went on ahead and hit Shift and Alt again, and for the double arrow, and dragged a copy of that over so that you can see what that looks like. But I'm actually going to hit T and then just copy Control A all of that and then change the language to home and then repeat that step and type about as well. And because this wasn't a fluid video, you weren't able to see that as well. But I just wanted to make sure that I like described to you what it was that I did. So these are going to be our buttons for our simulation. And what that allows us to do is it starts to build out a schematic for where you would place things on a website. And so we'll go ahead and get rid of the navigation menu text now that we kind of know. Typically, when you see a website, what you're used to is seeing like the home and the about page on one side or the other. And so I just went down to this artboard, and I guess I could show you how to copy all the content from one page to the next. I do recommend that if you're going to do that, if you have pages that have duplicate content, I guess, yeah, let's go ahead and add some text here. And so we'll just add like some placeholder text. So I'll just put a rectangle to kind of block off that's where the text would go, and maybe a second rectangle to show that there is a button here. Because while that may not work, we may not need that on the pop-up page as much. It'll be really, really helpful to have on the about page, which for the purposes of like demonstrating what this wireframe looks like will be consistent. So I'm just going to line that up really quick, and then we'll select the T and yeah, so the word button, we'll just go on ahead and adjust the text and resize it. So this is where I was having a little bit of trouble. Oh, goodness. All right, so we'll, if I can click in there, or let's see, yeah, sometimes it'll be a little hinky, and so you may just have to go back and hit escape and just grab the arrow and then resize and then adjust the border or fill. I try not to work with the borders too much for text because of this, but we're just going to work through it for this lesson. And so what we'll do is adjust the text. I think I made it a little too small. It's underneath the font drop down, the sizing, and we'll just try to find a size that is legible so that you can tell that it's a button. And then let's see, if we make it a little bit bolder, that should work. And what we'll be able to do is just, I guess we'll just try to center this in the middle of the rectangle so that you know that it's a button. Oops, almost dropped my phone. So that you know that it's a button, and then what we'll do, let's see, is there anything else? I guess we can add just some placeholder text. So I just typed in like lorem ipsum and then placeholder text. And as you can see, it's centered. So over here on the right hand side, I'm gonna, let's see, look for the alignment button. And so I'll change it from being aligned center to left justified so that it looks a little more clean like a paragraph. And then I'll just hit escape and just drag that into the text area so that you have a general idea of where things go. The point of a wireframe is that it's not the entire concept, it's just a way to help you map out the layout of where things go. And so for this, I am just from a representation standpoint going to make the text a little bit smaller so that you know that there's a header and like a paragraph text in there. And the only reason I'm doing that, like adding that level of detail, is for web accessibility, and we'll have to talk about that a little bit more in a future lesson. But screen readers use headers, so it's when I'm building websites, I try to be mindful of making sure that there's a designation for text that is like a gateway for other text. So making sure that the headers are denoted and separate from the actual paragraph text, because a screen reader is going to have to pick that up. And I just want to make sure that people know not to use like bold instead of like using a header if they're coding this, if I like were to hand it off to developers. So let's see. Now I think I'm going to add a little bit more spacing. So over here on the right, I just added some spacing in between the text to give it a little more negative space so that you can kind of read it a little better. And then I think we should be good. So what I'm going to do is just click on this artboard and then select Control A. So that should capture everything on that specific artboard, but if you were to click outside, it would copy everything. And then I went down and clicked the pop-up artboard and then just hit Control V to move everything that's from the first artboard to the second. And then I'm going to go and do the same thing to the About page. And so let me use the space bar to move over to the About page so that you can see what this looks like. And we'll make some modifications to the pop-up. It's not going to be exactly the same, but it means that we don't have to like try to resize everything. So yeah, so here's the About page. I went on ahead and just hit Control or Command V for the About page because it'll be similar when we go back. And then I went back to the pop-up page since the first one is more or less done, and we can just make adjustments for things that we won't need. So I'll probably, for the button, and maybe, let's see, we can probably get rid of this button because we won't need it since that's going to be where the pop-up modal goes. So I just hit right click and then delete for that. And then I hit escape, or I went on ahead and deleted this image because it'll just be in the way. And then hit escape so that I could drag the handle for this rectangle out, and then made that larger. And so the header and the footer aren't going to change, but this like pop-up modal that we want to demonstrate to show that like this is a user interaction. If someone were to click on that button, this is what would pop up. So I'll just move the lorem ipsum text over, and where'd it go? I guess I can just, let's see. So then I'll just change the text to rate this website, and then the placeholder text is still there so that you know that that is different. And then I went on ahead and grabbed the triangle tool and made one. So I'm just going to demonstrate like how you, let's say you need to build a shape that doesn't exist. So I just moved that there. I wouldn't worry about it being centered in the page because we're going to move this in a bit. So I'm going to try to make a star, and let's see. So I just grabbed, like, hovered next to the handle and rotated, and so I was able to, so you can see how the shapes rotate. But now that I'm thinking about it, I'm probably doing this the hard way. And so yeah, because I'm looking at the angles that this need to be a star, and I realize that I don't actually know the math for that. So I'm just going to come over here and then just put this back at, I think that I can probably just make like the old school geometric star. So what I'll do is I'll put 1 at 0 and I'll put 1 at 180, and I can probably get rid of this third star, so I'll just go ahead and delete it. And then we'll, I'll combine these two stars. So what I'll do, or triangles to make a star, just using kind of simple geometry. So those are lined up together. I'll click on both of them with the shift key, and then just go up to the top right hand corner and combine them, very similar to how we did with the triangle tool. And then the fill color, I'll just click in and then drag the slider around to yellow. And so that gives us, like, as you can see, kind of where my cursor is, like the hexadecimal code. And if we need to use that again, and I'll show you why that, or how that could come up. Let's see, let's go ahead and hit Shift and Alt again, or you can copy and paste if that is like more confusing. Just remember that when you paste it, it'll show up in the same spot, so just hit Escape and then drag the new version over. But going ahead and click Shift and select both of those because I'm going to show you a tool that I think that you'll find pretty useful. Actually, let me change the color of this so that you can see. So I just changed the hexadecimal color, and I just kind of, I'm just highlighting here so that you can see that you can actually go back in. I'll click the blue one and then just copy and paste where the hexadecimal code goes. So I changed it from blue and back to yellow again so that you can kind of see that that is an option that's available to you. And then, all right, so now I'm going to hit Shift and select both of these so that you can see up in the right-hand corner underneath the Align Tools is a repeat grid. So when you select that, you can just grab the handle and drag this out to the right. And this is where you want to like try to figure out like what kind of spacing you want, because what it'll do is replicate what you already have. So if you need to make rows of buttons or radio buttons or check boxes or like stars for like ratings, I hit ungroup grid so that you can see that. And then also ungroup. So let's say you're like, oh no, I have too many stars. You can just click on one of them, and I just hit Control Z to go back to the repeat grid option, and then we have like half a star, so it's like 4.5 stars. But just so that you know that that's let's say your pop-up option is specifically for that. And so what if you see the button here up at the top underneath like the File Edit Object ribbon, I clicked the Prototype button, and then selected the button from the first artboard. What that allows you to do is actually create interactive functionality. And so when you drag that down to the artboard, and let's say I went to the top right, and I'll show you this again. How I got there, but if I wanted to show that clicking on the button will take me to the pop-up, I'm able to like demonstrate that for like my boss or like a client. So I did notice that, and I'm going to click the design feature next to the prototype ribbon item and grab the line tool. When I was in that, I wasn't able to get out of it without just closing it. So that can be a really great way to test a website. So I'm going to put like a X to close out just so that you can see. And then the grids are helping me figure out like kind of what a square starting point would be so that I can make the actual X. And then I'll just go ahead and click those, and then with the Shift key, and then group those together and change it. I think I'm going to make this like a 5 so that you can see it, because I want you to be able to see it demonstrated. So when I go and group these together, then I can go back up to the top right hand corner and select the it looks like a play button. But first we'll go to prototype again so that you can see what that looks like. We'll select the X and then go ahead and drag it to the About page, and that will allow you to see what that'll allow you to kind of see the demo when we go up to the like play button up at the top to be able to preview. And that's uh-oh, what did I just do? Oh, okay. So then we're able to actually go in and we'll just add another rectangle in the word submit, because like closing out, what do you do once you rate it? Or you just close it out and then just hope it's there? It might be a little more clear to have like a submit button so people like know that they've actually accomplished a goal, which is like a important UX concept, and this is why it's really good to test out your prototypes with yourself or with another person. So I'm just going to go ahead and add this text here and move it into the button, and then we'll go back to prototype and just connect that to the About page as well. Even though they take you to the same destination, it just is a little more clear for someone who may not really understand what it is that you're asking them to do without like a guidepost. And you do also have the option of take like adjusting it so that the X just goes back to the home page as well. But for this one, I'm gonna like fill in the box. So I just double clicked in it and made it red. And then I'll just change the font color to white so that it's a little more clear. But you typically don't use color in wireframes. I just am showing you that the functionality exists in case you need to show emphasis when you're building a wireframe, in case you're like pitching to a client or your boss and you just want to make sure that they notice. So let's see, I'm going to go in here and we've connected the X to the About page. And so what we'll do is when we click on the X, that should take you to the About page, but so you can't really tell if this is the home page or the About page. So I'm going to go ahead and close this out and then go back up to design, which is up here. And let's see, let's go ahead and actually, we'll go ahead and connect these like menu navigation buttons to the appropriate pages. So the About page to the About page, the home page to the home page, just so you can kind of get a sense of like what a like functioning site should look like, or you could adjust it in these little pop-up modals as well. And let's see, I know that we're missing one, but that's okay because we'll be able to test it in just a second. So let's see. I'm gonna go ahead and create another artboard. And I just clicked the arrow and dragged it over so that you could see that like I just put a contact page here even though we don't have a button for it yet, because we do have a button on the About page that goes nowhere, and so it's probably going to be less confusing if we just go on ahead and have that go to the contact page to know that that's our endpoint while we're clicking around in there. Let's see. All right. So if you click on any of these artboards that you've actually connected, it shows the connectors and what those relationships look like. And so that can be a way to see if there's anything missing. And then I just went to the play button in the top right-hand corner. So when I click home, hold on, this is, okay. Yeah, so I went back to design, and so this is the thing that I needed to change. So we'll change it from lorem ipsum in the header to about this page, and so that text will let us know when we're testing it that we've actually gone to a new page. So that's a thing that you may not catch when you're copying and pasting, but now that we're back in here with the play button, when I click the About button, it takes me to the About this page. You know that you're on the About page. Let's see. Also, probably clicking the button. Let's see. We're clicking the About page. So it looks like the button is taking us to the next page, but it's not sticking, and I think it's because maybe I'm clicking in the text. So we're just checking those connections to make sure everything is where it should be. All right, so I'm going to click this button again. All right, it looks like that works. We'll click the submit button. There's something hinky going on with that, but the X works. So then we'll click this button on the about page and it takes us to the contact page. So let's go ahead and check the pop-up, the submit button. It doesn't have a connection. All right, so we're going to connect that to the about page. And then we'll go ahead and test that. I did see an extra thing there that shouldn't be, but we'll get to that in a second. So we're on the home page. The pop-up happens. You've rated some stars. You're going to click submit. It takes you to the about page. Then we click the button on the about page, which should take us to the contact page. Looks good. It looks like it's working the way that it should. So for the purposes of this assignment, I just wanted to make sure that you have an overall sense of what Adobe XD does and how you can actually test the work that you do to make sure that the folks who you're communicating your ideas to can use and understand and be able to identify any gaps. And this is a really great way to save yourself a lot of work and money by figuring that out on the front end, and instead of trying to figure out why it isn't working after you've done hours and hours of code. So this can be a really, really great tool to both communicate your ideas, but also to test them before you start doing the most cost intensive or labor intensive work. Let's see, so now that we have everything working together and all of our connections work, I think what we'll do is it might be a good stopping point. And what we'll do is we'll just go on ahead and we'll go on ahead and oops.